Welcome to this week's edition of This Week in Perfect Team. And as per usual, as per new tradition, we are starting with another hype train. And this one comes courtesy of Chuck, throwing out 5 gift subs to the community. RB Stens subscribing with his Amazon account. And then wait till next year, continuing the gift sub that he had received previously. Thank you guys all for the support. But who are we and what do we do? So we've got a lot of folks in here. Maybe there's some folks that haven't seen this show before. Well, this show here, the purpose of this show here is to provide instant community feedback on all new content releases that Chris drops on us. And Chris, I wouldn't say went easy on us today, but he didn't give us a ton of quantity of cards, but he did give us some good quality of cards to dig into. We've got some perfect cards to figure out how these guys are going to play at the highest level, because that's what perfect cards have to do. We've got a very sweet rose card to talk about as well, and we'll be doing all of that. Joining me, as always, is your Kidneys, the keeper of the sheet. If anyone doesn't know him, you need to spend more time on Discord. If anyone hasn't used his Google Docs sheet that has all of the cards in the known Out of the Park universe, you're doing yourself a disservice. Definitely check that out, and definitely let him know if you have any questions. If this is your first time with us tonight, drop us a follow. Drop us click the notification icon so you know when we go live in the future. And man, look, the party is just continuing in the chat here. Wait till next year, dropping a 5 gift bomb out there. Thanks so much. Wait till next year. Awesome. Really appreciate it. All right, so we've got a great show for you guys tonight. What is that show going to look like? Well, we're doing the card rundown. 5 special edition cards. We've got Kidneys back. Last week, I had to go OK Boomer, OK Zoomer without him, and I never want to do it again. So OK Zoomer will be as per usual tonight. And then we're going to finish off with a bronze tourney bonanza. I have been fervently collecting tons and tons of bronze tourney data, and it's time to do something with it. It's time to talk about it. And Kidneys has his model. Kidneys knows everything. Kidneys can't be told what's up. But my data is going to do the talking tonight, and we'll see who ends up coming out on top of that friendly and lively debate as we talk about bronze tourney hitters and defenders. So we'll do hitting tonight. We'll do pitching another night. All right, so before we get into the cards tonight, what is the broadcast schedule? So on Thursdays, we do this show. On Sundays, as Chris mentioned, I will now be broadcasting on the mothership, on the Out of the Park Twitch channel, which means a couple things. One, I've never done that before, so I'll need to be ready for the hype needed for that channel, for the mothership. And 2, it means all you guys are going to get drops when you're watching my bald, shiny head as I announce the Perfect League World Series. If you haven't ever seen one of my World Series broadcasts, please do give it a try. It's a broadcast not where you're just seeing someone go through the highlight engine and talk about what happened on a given play. I really try to contextualize what we're seeing. I try to contextualize what we're seeing from the managers, how the cat and mouse game is playing out. I have some tools that I lean on to help me break down the matchups that we're seeing from a pitcher perspective. So definitely give that a check, give that a look on Sunday. I think that you might appreciate what you're seeing there. And then Tuesdays I've got a very different show. So the name of the show on Tuesdays is called Reading Between the Lineups. And what I do there is I sit down with someone who's a big figure in the Discord community, and we talk. We talk about their experience with the game. We talk about who they are as a person, if they want to get into that. We really just get to know the person behind the Discord handle and the person behind the Discord personality. And coming up on Tuesday, we've got 2-time Perfect League champion Jay Mallett. Definitely want to check that out. All right, enough out of me. Kidneys, how you doing tonight?
Whew, I'm good. It's good to be back. I think Gitdik, if I'm saying that right, the Destroyer has relinquished my soul, and I return to the mortal realm. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be back, ready to jump into some cards, debate you over some bronze tourney. I'm very excited for Boomer v Zoomer because I have a great one for tonight.
Well, that just terrifies me to the core. Let's jump into our cards, but before we do so, let me just say thank you to Rocketer, who's gifting a sub to the community. That one ended up with Hip and Knee Doc. We've got Cause Longhorn gifting a sub as well. I really appreciate the support there. And anonymous cheer. We got Bender Guy subscribing with Amazon Prime. So tonight is off to a great start, and the hype train carries on. All right, first card we got tonight. We got Hal NEWHOUSER, and I think this might be our first repeat. So the last Hal that dropped was a card that we looked at. I thought it was a reverse split lefty. I thought it also shared some of the control concerns here. So when I look at this card, and when I think about where we're at in the game cycle, and where starting pitchers need to be from a control perspective, I get really squirrely. I get really itchy. Seeing not only the 79 that's on his VR profile, but even seeing the 86. And so because of that, this is not a starting pitcher to me. This is definitely a reliever, and it's just a matter of how effective a reliever can be when they're going to struggle with walks. What do you see when you look at Hal NEWHOUSER?
Yeah, that's really the question here is like how much is stuff worth when you're throwing so much of it into a card versus control, and how good is the lefty specialist going to be? And the question is, how many lefty specialists do you really need? Because last week we just got a banger in with the SE Carlton card. So really, in what world are you going to run this card and SE Carlton and a bunch of other cards? And I know I was talking with you pre-stream about this, and I think the only scenario maybe you want this card is in kind of a righty cheese lineup. You're playing a bunch of lefties in your bullpen, and this is what you're throwing out there to stop the lefties from punishing you. But even then, you're already running a lefty nerfed park, so it's only good away maybe if you're microing a lot. I don't know. It's an interesting card, but the lower control certainly hurts it a lot with its really high-end stuff.
Yeah, I really want someone to unlock this. Hopefully someone in the chat has enough of whatever needs to be collected to unlock this card, because I want to know what that stuff boost looks like in the pen. I mean, with only 3 pitches here, with the pitch values the way they are, that versus left stuff is going to be creeping up towards Fellerian levels. So hopefully someone can find that. And honestly, you know, Carlton's control bothered me last week, and I actually rage listed him on the auction house after an unfortunate outing that he had for my team today in the DLL. And I think control is just really important. As we look at this card here, if you're really just going to hone in and focus in on his ideal side, which is facing left-handed batters in some sort of specialist role with crazy stuff, I think that this card might even be more viable than that Carlton card, who I think has across-the-board lower control. Could be wrong on that. Actually, we see it right here in the similarity scores. So Carlton, the SE Carlton has 9 less control. So start with that one, take 9 off the control. So I could be wrong on that one. But
I think that's wrong. Carlton has more control. Carlton has 95 control V left and 84 control V right. So Carlton just has more control. Something must have broke when you were pulling numbers and you pulled the wrong Carlton.
No, yeah, actually, I'm reading my own chart incorrectly. So the way to read this chart, and again, for anyone that's new, walk with me down this journey. So I'm reading this chart incorrectly. The chart is correct here. So the way you get to NEWHOUSER is, in this example that we're talking about here, you start with Carlton, you give him 4 extra stuff, but you take away 3 movement, and you take away 9 control. And so that branch that I was walking out on is completely faulty. No one follow me. Carlton will absolutely be better versus left-handed pitching or left-handed batters, and it won't be close. So I think the argument that you were making that NEWHOUSER is just a worse version of Carlton for the same role is accurate here.
Yeah, exactly. So really the thing with Carlton is Carlton is like the best pitcher V left we have right now. And it's a very small stuff bump for NEWHOUSER for 9 less control is probably not a good trade-off. And the stuff bump could be bigger for NEWHOUSER. It probably is bigger for NEWHOUSER.
So Marksman's in the chat, and I think he's got it at 178 VL and then 158 VR.
I think that's even. So that's like about the same. So it's definitely not better than Carlton. So the question is ever if you'd run this in Carlton, and I don't really see too many scenarios where that gets done. So.
Yep, I mean the comps
that's
that we
for
have,
the other card, not is what he's saying. That's for the other NEWHOUSER is what he gets. So if you expect something similar for this card, it does get a better stuff bump than the Carlton, but it's still not enough to make up for 9 points of control for sure, right?
And I will say this, the similarity score hits that we do have here are not horrible. I mean, you kind of would expect, given that NEWHOUSER is a lefty, although the control is so big there. So, I don't know. This is a whole big bucket of I don't know and stammering on our part. But I think that it's safe to argue that Carlton would be the better lefty specialist in your pen.
Yeah, no, 100%. Carlton's the better lefty specialist. If you'd run another lefty specialist, maybe this is up there on the list. When I was looking at it, it's certainly not bad. I mean, it's a lefty version of Feller. The question is, does the lefty version of Feller plays? Probably something I'd like to see some observed data on before making a conclusion on it. But in general, he's probably just going to get punished too hard by a card like Hornsby to actually be played.
Yep. Let's try to match that same smoothness in our analysis of the Alex Rodriguez card. So we've got a peak A-Rod, shortstop for the Yankees, via Chris's complicated logic that he shared with us, which actually did make sense after explaining it here. And as you see this A-Rod here, we don't have shortstop defense based on everything that we know about the current meta. You know, going with your range under 100 here, even with the rest of the attributes here, that's not going to be able to play at shortstop. So then your question is just, will the bat be enough to put him at one of the other positions? And at this point in time, when you've got the top teams with Boggs already out there and still trying to find a way to get Hornsby out there, I think it becomes a real challenge to find the spot for Alex Rodriguez's bat. Now, in a Boggs-free team where you're running Jackie, I still would probably tip the scales to Jackie at second over A-Rod. But what do you think?
The issue with the card is it's got power higher than contact and its Ks is kind of low. So we're looking at like just a little bit of a bird here. And while its BAPIP isn't bad because it has low Ks, just all around kind of understated, and we're not running shortstop defense like you pointed out. So it's more of a third baseman that doesn't hit anywhere near something like a Boggs or a Hornsby. More like a Hornsby because it is a right-handed hitter. So really comparing it with some of the top tier third basemen you're going to see play, it doesn't really come close. Now, it does have better defense than them, so that's sort of its advantage. But, I mean, I have this card coming in 33 ranked overall v left, and 83 v right is really just not playable at the highest level for a bat. So maybe you could play him in lower levels as a shortstop that hits well, generate you some points that way. But
hey, do you still have the feature within your sheet to project a perfect league performance or project the highest level league triple slash line?
I'm looking at it right now. What do you want to know?
I want to know what A-Rod comes in at.
Okay, so projected slash line for A-Rod is a 224 average, a 289 on base percentage, and a 660 OPS.
660 OPS isn't going to get it done unless you're Ozzie Smith and you're playing absolutely impeccable shortstop defense.
Absolutely. That is, yes. So anybody that's hitting the 660 OPS is with 96 range is just not going to cut it really in the meta. Like I said, the bat isn't terrible for lower levels because it does have a bit of pop, and the BAPIP comes in at around 73. So it's not unplayable lower levels, and the defense is more than acceptable where you could throw him at shortstop at a low level. But outside of that, I don't really see a great place for him. So,
yeah, and there are no hits with the exception of this Ted Williams, face of the franchise here in our similarity score. And when someone comes in at this stage of the game cycle and they don't resemble any other cards that are being widely played, that's normally not a great sign as well. Next, we have got Pete Rose, and Pete Rose fills up the screen for us here because he is absolutely loaded with stock defense, with stock defensive ratings at first, second, third, left field, right field, and then Chris was kind enough to supply us with the skill factors underpinning the ratings here. Now, one of the big differences between Rose and all the other cards we got tonight is that Rose is not a 100 card. Rose is a 96, which opens up all sorts of other playable venues, including diamond tournaments, including being able to save some cap points in a cap tournament. So this card here is very interesting to me. And as we're talking about tournaments, stock defense really matters in tournaments. I know this as we're going to be talking about our bronze tournament roster building later today. Having stock defense and being able to at least fake an effort at a given position when you need to fill in someone because there are no off days, and you need someone to man a position without being an absolute defensive sinkhole is a great attribute and a great asset for you. And if you have a card like this one, who's one of his comps is Tony Gwynn. You know, the Tony Gwynn that everyone wants on their team and everyone who's going to win anything has locked into their outfield. That's one of his comps here. And so he's got that profile with very strong contact, strong enough avoid K, and then the power is low enough to serve as almost a force multiplier. What do you think of Pete Rose?
I really love him. I just wish he had a little more defense. I love switch hitters. Absolutely love switch hitters. I was playing the 91 Pete Rose for ages. I remember some people in DLL back in the day when I first joined, I was playing the 91 Pete Rose when he came out. And I think Fabic was as well. And people were asking us, why does he hit so well? He doesn't look that good on paper. Why does he hit so well? This is one of those super BAPIP inflated cards, and being a switch hitter means you almost always get the better end of a pitcher's splits as well. And those two things combined really leave to be a card that will almost always outperform projections. And for projections, this card is pretty good. We're talking about projections. I have a card that's projected to hit 273 in Perfect League right here. That's a pretty great stat line. Now, the issue is competition. With defensive numbers like this card is really only a first baseman or a DH. And how do you compete with some of the other competition? He projects 285 V left, but some of the V-left specialties, I mean, you put this card up against a Hank Aaron, and it's kind of hard to compare, just on a stat line alone. So, I mean, this card is very obviously a diamond tourney, probably staple. He'd be very good in a cap tourney just with his flexibility. I just don't know how you squeeze him out there for somewhere like Perfect League. But for pretty much anywhere else in most diamond leagues and stuff, I mean, he's a fantastic utility player. He's going to have a lot of versatility, and he's going to hit very, very well for contact. So,
finish that triple slash projection. I want to say you started with 277 on the average, or what was that?
273, 322, 712.
So 712 on the OPS.
Now, I'm going to guarantee you he's going to outperform that because of how just switch hitters work and how my sheet calculates switch hitting. I will guarantee you he will outperform that slash line.
Yeah, let's dig in a little bit on that concept. So someone might be sitting there saying, what do you mean? Like, why would switch hitters overperform? But like, what's the effect there? And really it boils down to the fact that when you combine a pitcher's backup card rating and a hitter's backup card rating, there's almost a double effect at play. Where let's say Pedro is facing Hank Aaron. Well, Pedro's better versus righties, and wouldn't you know it, Hank Aaron is worse versus righties. So there's almost a duplicative effect there. Well, when Pete Rose comes up, he's never facing, with the exception of reverse split pitchers, he's never facing that first negative advantage. So he's almost always getting the opportunity to face that pitcher's weak side, which is only going to hit him with one negative, which is his own splits here, and they're pretty darn neutral. Would you add anything to that, Kidneys?
No, exactly. That's the thing. So against most pitchers, he's going to be playing against their weak side, which is going to give him a slight advantage to versus how my model calculates things a little bit. And I see Jesse Rush. If I make Perfect League, bud, I will play this card just for you. And I will show you that this card will hit for contact in Perfect League because it is split proof and it hits very well based on my projections. The issue is just I can't find a place to play it.
Yeah.
And I really wish I could fit this card in my build right now because I love Pete Rose, but Yeah, it's a little rough.
Yeah, so a couple things here. So wait till next year with another great point that pseudoing or doing anything funky with your rotation is completely useless against a switch hitter that has neutral splits. So that's another asset in Rose's quiver there, another arrow in his quiver. Now, as far as his perfect league viability, he would need to hit better than your DH because to everyone's point that they're making in the chat that you've just made, he doesn't belong out there defensively. The outfield range is unplayable. The infield range is first base only. And is he better than Boggs or Roger Connor or George Brett at first base? Maybe Kidneys would argue yes. But I think that while yes, you're right, he could hit for a high average at perfect. The person you would need to displace to allow that to happen would be a net negative value to your overall team.
Yep, and that's just the issue is that there's such a first base. DH is probably the toughest place to compete for a hitting spot, and he just doesn't do that overall well enough.
Yep. And a huge shout out and huge thank you to MacJax in the chat, gifting out 5 tier 1 subs to Mariquan, JFRNX, Emerald Blade 81, Statsmonger, BDL1234. Welcome to the clubhouse. Let's go to the next one. Wait, before we do, we have got our first ever double fave. This is episode 11 for us. We've been doing this now for nearly 3 months, and we've yet to run into a stream where we have overlapping faves. And we finally did it here. Now, one might argue we only had 5 cards to choose from, so in a neutral world, we had a 20% chance of this happening. But I found this to be pretty notable, and I think it really just boils down to the fact that this is a very, very usable card in multiple avenues, and even though I just finished telling you that he's not likely to be on your Perfect League roster, I think this card has a ton of utility in the Perfect League universe.
Yeah, exactly, right. Maybe he's not going to play in Perfect League, but he'll play in all sorts of other, he'll play Diamond and Below, no problem. He'll play in every tournament that he's applicable for. So he's just a really cool card, getting so much position eligibility and flexibility while not being the greatest defensively. It's just going to be a really consistent hitter at a very high level. So
next, we have got Felix, King Felix. We get our peak version of him. And here he comes in with a pretty split dominant profile here, significantly more stuff versus his same side versus right-handed batters. And that flowing through to the other metrics as well, movement and control. You see that the control dipping down to Scary Land, down at 84 versus left, which might suggest to you that his best landing spot is in the bullpen. As we look at the similarity scores, you almost feel like you need to slam on the brakes because you see so much red here. And that's because the people that he most closely profiles to here all struggle pretty significantly in the Perfect League, with FIPS up around 5. Now, Perfect League average FIP is 4.18, and as we look at what he does versus right, even a card like Bob Gibson, is only at 4.92. So I think that when you don't bring a ton of control or a ton of movement to the table, you're going to need to overcome that with a lot of stuff. And even after a stuff boost here, I don't think Felix will cross that threshold. What do you think?
I saw this card and I immediately ran to my little comparison table and I checked him against the playoff Bob Gibson. And he pops up on both sides of the ball here on your similarity score. And playoff Bob Gibson is this card, but better in every single metric, but movement v left by 1 point. And I don't know. I struggle to see where this card fits because it's not getting a big bullpen buff. It doesn't have the control V left to start for you. And I just think there's better options to put in your pen otherwise. So it's kind of a rough one for me. Gibson kind of outclasses it. And Gibson's actually not that bad. API ran him with a lot of success a few weeks ago. I don't know if he's still running him. I think he switched his build up again. But yeah, I don't really see too much of a place for this. I don't know why you would want 2 of the same build.
Yeah, as we're looking at him versus right-handed batters, which is what you would ideally try to set up as an active manager, Gibson's just a better mousetrap.
Yeah, exactly. Gibson is just this, but a little bit better. And Gibson was like borderline. Do you run Gibson or not? So this is Gibson with a much weaker stuff bump because you're probably not starting Gibson outside of maybe righty cheese. And I just don't see it really coming to fruition here for
Yeah,
Felix.
and to this point, Gibson has been unable to unseat previous mainstays like a Red Ruffing. Like to this point, Red Ruffing is putting up better bullpen numbers than the new Bob Gibson. And if this card is worse than the Bob Gibson, it's just not going to have a spot. Let me quickly call out Lipitor Kid dropping 5 new subs on the community. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all the support. And then we've got API dropping a couple of gemstones for us to gawk at as well. Appreciate the support as always. And I would agree that with Quanta Condor saying Ruffing is ridiculously underrated, he has held up extremely well. Gets a very nice boost into the pen. One of my mainstays in my bullpen. Next, we've got Larry Walker, which some people thought we were going to get with Face of the Franchise for the Expos. Didn't end up getting him then, or the Rockies. And we do get him now. And we get him with a Rockies logo appended to him here. As we look at this card, it's a clear platoon card who's bringing you some very solid contact, borderline acceptable avoid K here. You don't like that power is the standout attribute. From a defensive perspective, he's beneath the threshold that we've come to expect to be in the field. So, Ty Cobb is even at 82 range, and most people are trying to avoid having to put him out there, and Larry Walker here is at 78. So this bat versus right really needs to stand up to the DH standard, and with the way that the ratings are lining up, I don't expect that to happen. And my similarity score table doesn't either. We don't see any hits there in the high 700s of OPS. What do you think of Mr. Larry Walker here?
Just first, before we continue, I have been requested to give a moment of silence for the great debate of Vladimir Guerrero inflicted by Chris on our boy Walnut. So if everyone can hit us up with the ... in the Twitch chat, as is tradition, as our moment of silence. Thank you. But more seriously, Larry Walker to me resembles a lot like the Colorado Face of the Franchise card. He looks a lot like our boy Todd Helton, and you can see that on the similarity table. And I don't know, like I just look at this card, I look at Todd Helton, and I see Todd Helton, and I see a card that has just consistently underperformed because of bad splits and not having the world's greatest like power profile. So I don't really see what this card is going to do for you. His range is kind of low, so he's on the lower end, like borderline unplayable, actually in the outfield, being 78, right? Well, his other statistics aren't that great. Range is the real important one for you, right? The contact is high, yes, but the power is also very high. And the Ks are low, but the power is so high that his BABIP's only about a 70, and Helton's is a 67. So we're looking pretty comparable across the board there. And then his V left is just pretty terrible. I mean, it's a smidge better than Helton's. It's like a 233 average to a 220 and like a 630 to a 602 on base plus slugging. So maybe he's better than Helton overall, even though his V right profile seems to be a bit weaker to me. But I don't really see this card being too playable overall. It's like a fast Todd Helton.
Yeah.
Might be better V left.
And just like we were talking about on the last slide of Felix Hernandez just being a worse mousetrap than Bob Gibson, same thing can be said for Helton. I mean, if we look at this Helton comp table in the versus right, which is most applicable for Helton and Walker, he is Todd Helton with less contact and less avoid K and more power. So just kind of moving in the wrong direction almost across the board there, and you're also going to get less eye for your trouble as well. So he's going to hit worse than Todd Helton, and Todd Helton is no longer used at the highest levels. So this is a 100 card that's not going to be able to be played in perfect, and will likely hit the auction house, and might just be a nice value card if this one ends up being collected widely and not used by those players that are redeeming it.
Yes, certainly. Like, for example, like I play Todd Helton on my second account, the Pickle Me Elmos, which are a free-to-play team. They're in gold. They're in the super tough gold league, the the BFF, or they were in the BFF TBD DLL mashup Gold League, and they held their own, and they played Helton, and they did okay with. So this is a card that could play for you if you're a lower level team. You pick them up in a budget, you could play them in left field, and he'd do okay. So it's not necessarily an unplayable card. It's just not going to play for you in Perfect League, right? And probably not going to play for you too well in Diamond League either. If you're playing lefty cheese at a lower level, you could throw this guy in left field. He might be better than Luis Gonzalez, and hopefully it costs about the same amount, and that's what you're going to get for him.
So that's the achievement unlocked number 2. We got 5 SE cards. Kidneys and I both aligned to the Pete Rose. As far as impacts to the established meta, we didn't really identify anyone getting displaced. We talked about maybe NEWHOUSER carving out a specialist role in the bullpen, but that being challenged by the recent addition of the Steve Carlton card. We talked about FELIX Hernandez trying to break in as a righty arm in the pen, but likely held down by Gibson, who might be at risk of losing some of his innings there to previously established cards. And then we talked about A-Rod probably not rising to the level of being able to warrant innings played at either second or third. So I think tonight we didn't really catch too much meta impact, with the exception of Pete Rose. I do expect Pete Rose to be a card that is sought after, and a card that is going to be used prevalently at the applicable levels where you can deploy a 96 at the tournament scene.
Yep, I totally agree. I think we got some fringe cards out of NEWHOUSER and FELIX where they were just under the cuff. I don't think Walker and Rodriguez are that close. Probably more lower level generation type cards. And I think Rose is pretty interesting for tournaments, so I think you'll probably see a lot of teams going after him. And looking at the missions, it looks like Rose's mission is pretty easy. Walker's mission looks really hard, so it looks really, really hard. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Do you have it in front of you? What's the breakdown of how many you need?
You need 4 diamonds for Walker, and they are all not cheap diamonds, except for Morneau, but... yeah.
Okay. Well, I will be sure to check that out once we are offline here tonight. All right, so those are the cards. And so what do we do after we're done reviewing the cards? We have what we call our 7th inning stretch. And it's a little game that we like to call OK Boomer, OK Zoomer. And the spirit of this game here is that I show Kidneys 3 things from the 90s. And he is tasked with identifying what they are. No spoilers in the chat. Nobody help him out. He's a big boy. And we see how well he does with that. And then when we're done with those 3, he will show me one Zoomer meme from today, and I will try to make sense of it. Let's get started. First, we have a submission from Cause Longhorn, and the submission is this. What movie were these guys the stars of in the 90s?
Oh, I mean, I've seen Home Alone.
Oh, no, an easy slam dunk for the Kidneys.
Easy one.
Home Alone, and me and the family just watched it this past weekend. The Wet Bandits. Great movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I love that movie.
I mean, that movie stands up very well over time. You go back and you watch some movies from when you were a kid, and I recently did this with Ghostbusters, and I felt like, it didn't really hold up all that well over time. Didn't really enjoy it on the rewatch nearly as much as I thought I would. But Home Alone absolutely holds up, and that goes for all the various flavors of it. Home Alone 1 being an absolute classic. Next one. Who is this guy?
That, and I know this recently from a meme I saw. I don't remember the name of the actor. I believe it was a Saturday Night Live sketch. But this is Captain Planet, isn't it?
This is Captain Planet. I'm surprised you got it, and I'm surprised that you did it via Ace and Gary from the SNL skit.
Yeah, that is what interesting.
It was. So how do you know Captain Planet? Is it just through the SNL thing? You never saw an episode of this?
I've heard of people talk of Captain Planet, but I had never seen him, and then I saw the skit. Recently, somebody posted it, and I thought it was really funny. And I made the connection. That's what Captain Planet looks like. So,
Who can tell me in the chat
yep.
what the catchphrase was? Wasn't it like when our powers combine, we create Captain Planet? What was it? Someone's got the tagline, I'm sure. It's on the picture. The power is yours? No, that wasn't the tagline. There was something that they would say whenever they summoned Captain Planet every time.
Yeah, it was Don Cheadle. That's who it was. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll figure that out later. Next and last, we've got this. What is this toy that became very popular in the 90s?
Is that a Tamagotchi?
Man, Kidneys is on fire tonight. 3 for 3? I can't believe it.
I think they relaunched them when I was maybe 8 or 10, around there.
I did confirm that. They still have an active website. They're still selling
these. Do
these.
they really? Wow.
I just figured that they were far enough off the beaten path that you'd struggle to pull it out. So how do you know what a Tamagotchi is?
I think one of my friends had one growing up. Somebody my age actually had one of these. Maybe it was like a Happy Meal type thing or something. I don't know exactly, but I've heard of them. I don't know why, but probably somewhere on the internet something.
So we've got some breaking news. If I had a breaking news drop, and I definitely need to add one to my stream deck here, I would play that hit right now. But we have got within the chat here, who is it? Aster31 announcing that the NEWHOUSER stuff bump is up to 192 VL, which I believe will be a new high watermark of any card in the game.
I think the SC Van Mungo is higher. I think that hits 194, if I remember right. But 192 makes them interesting. I don't think it's better than Carlton still because it's a 9-point control gap, but it's certainly interesting. It's probably worth it to give him a shot. So, get him out there.
And Bree Dave apparently posted that 5 minutes ago and we missed it. Sorry for that. Jesse Roach saying that we need to show him Pogs. That was on episode 1, and he did know what Pogs were, unfortunately.
I did.
So
I've heard the Pog song.
So here's the problem. Kidneys goes 3 for 3, which means I have to absolutely crush this and then put myself on the mercy of the court that is the chat for a win by appeal. So let's see what Kidneys has for me on the other side of this click. Why are you releasing only 5 cards tonight and forcing Kidneys to work overtime? And there's Chris in the chair.
Can you drag it up a little bit, or hide my face, one of the two, because I'm covering it.
Yeah, let me hide you real quick. That's ruining the. There it is. And then we've got Chris in the bottom right corner. Me, just happy to release some cool new cards. And I do know what this meme is. I've seen this meme a billion times. In the unedited meme, you've got a woman crying and screaming and pointing, and then a cat in the chair. So,
correct.
I mean, I know the meme. Now, where it started from or what it was used primarily for, I don't know. I mean, I've seen it used for only a billion different use cases since then. So what else can you tell me about this Zoomer meme? And by the way, I love this. So you tell Swecky Ox, as I'm sure he's the creator of it, that this is his finest work to date. I mean, look at Chris's face in the bottom right there. Look at the little smarmy grin on his face and how upset you are for being pulled out of bed to analyze 5 cards.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I got pulled out of bed. It was 5 cards. I was a sad boy. So, no, we got this. It is from the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and it was a very angry woman yelling at somebody else. I don't know the context of that. But then the cat was posted, I think, on Tumblr, and it was, he no like veggies. And that was it. And the two things blew up individually, and then somebody decided to combine them. And I think it became one of the most liked tweets of all time, and then it just spread like wildfire. And so it's a huge meme. It's been everywhere for a long time now. It's just great.
Well, I'm going to give you this week's edition of OK Boomer, OK Zoomer. You got your 3 without hesitation, without fail. I wasn't able to tell you where this came from or any of the backstory. So this is definitely your win, but this is my favorite image that we have ever had on this show. This is fantastic, and I plan on reusing this with reckless abandon. So thank you for bringing this to us tonight. So that is going to conclude OK Boomer, OK Zoomer with a resounding victory for the returning champ. Kidneys takes a week off and comes back learned. And we're going to have to try to get him next week. All right. Where do we go from here? All right, 7th inning stretch is done. And now it's time to dive into Bronze Tourney Bonanza. So if you don't care about Bronze Tourneys, if you don't care about that meta, if you don't care about playing in those, this might not be your cup of tea. However, we are absolutely going to be talking about, and Real Teddy Yo is correct that we need to do the giveaway before we jump into this. But if you care about building tourney rosters and you care about the design behind making all of the pieces come together and work, I think you'll likely be able to extract a lot of that as well. So let me go ahead and open up our giveaway. Once it's live, all you're going to need to do is type !ticket in the chat. So let me do that real quick. Boom. That should be live. !ticket in the chat. That gets you going. And while that's cooking, we'll let it go for a couple minutes. I'll give you the further backstory here. So one of the first things I did in this game was going hardcore into bronze tourneys once I realized that my game economy was not enough to get me to where I wanted to go. I wanted to be on top of the sugar pile. I wanted to win leagues that mattered. I wanted to stop losing every bet that I made with Walnut. And I knew that I had to build a game economy to help drive me forward. And what I landed on was the most spammable tourney in Perfect Team. And that's bronze tourneys. Bronze best of sevens to be specific. And so I tasked myself with extracting and exporting as much data as possible. I built a really darn good bronze tournament team, and I set it and forget it in May. After tweaking it many times, I got it to a good spot. It was right around a 600 win rate, and I just kind of froze it in Carbonite. And I ran it for the better part of, what would that have been? 7 months. And by the time I stopped running it, it had decayed some. So it went from a 600 win rate team down to a 550, which is not horrible. But the PTCS was coming up, and I said, all right, it's time to get back on the horse. It's time to get a bunch of new bronze data. All the live cards have shifted. There's new cards, and it's time to redo it. And so I did that, built a new team for PTCS, and have been continuing tweaking with it. And it's time to bring you guys some of those insights, some of those thoughts. The bronze tourney scene is super cool to me. And I know there's going to be someone in the chat, they probably already said it, that it's just like, throwing dice out there. It's an RNG fest. And when all the teams are of equal quality and strength, there's obviously some truth to that. I mean, you could say the same about Perfect League. But there's absolutely ways to go about building a team that can be successful and ways to really shoot yourself in the foot. And so we're going to be talking about some of that tonight. All right, last call for !ticket. We'll close it in 5 seconds. 3, 2, and 1. We're going to pull 3 winners. Each of the 3 winners are going to win 10,000 perfect points. Here comes number 1, Dogberry99. Number 2 is Invictus NTC. I believe that's a repeat winner from weeks past. And then last, certainly not least, we've got ZeroCat0. All right, guys, the way to redeem your 10,000 perfect points is to message me on Discord with your Out of the Park Perfect Team username with the exact correct capitalization. And once you do that, I will pass that along and we'll get you those 10,000 perfect points as soon as possible. And congrats to our winners tonight. Invictus confirming he's a 2-time winner. We've got Dogberry, first time following, first time winning. Beginner's luck there. All right, let's jump into our bronze tourney bonanza. So before we talked about positions, before we talked about players, I wanted to contextualize the environment. We know that tourneys are not beholden to the same scene of regular leagues, so you need to understand what's different about this versus that 2010 pesky baseline. So let's dive in. So first off, it's a very low scoring environment. As we look at the FIPS, the bronze FIP for pitching is 3.48. Perfect League FIP is 4.18. So we're talking more than a half a run different there. Next, we've got very active base paths. So in bronze, the average BSR of the average hitter in bronze is 2.9 per 600 plate appearances. In Perfect League, it's only 1.7. So we have more activity on the base paths, more runners going for that extra base, more stolen base attempts. Definitely something to keep in mind. And Bailey OOTP asking what BSR is. I'm going to take a drink of water and let you take that one, Kidneys.
So BSR, if I remember right, is just base running. So BSR is just a base running stat. It measures kind of base running, how successful you are at it. And it's just, the more positive you are, the more like successful you are overall at base running. And it can go negative. So negative means like just on average, you're not that great at base running, and you get like, you take negative plays, so you get thrown out a lot and things like that.
Yep, exactly. So it's a statistical effort to quantify how many runs you are adding on the bases or taking away. Like there are absolutely players with negative BSR. And so you see this being 2.9 versus 1.7, and that tells you that runners are adding significantly more runs to their team's scoring on average than in a regular Perfect League. Next, we've got embarrassingly bad hitting in bronze. Take a look at these triple slashes here. So in bronze, we're at 250, 301. League average on base percentage in bronze is 301. And the slugging is 366. And as we compare that to Perfect League, which would very closely mirror any level league, bronze, silver, gold, diamond, because they're all based on that 2010 baseline, it's 260, 326, 426. So we're talking about having a ton less people on base here. And of the batted balls in play, we've got a whole lot less going for extra bases. Next, speaking of balls in play, we've got tons of them. So in bronze, we see 5.3 K per 9 and 2.3 walks per 9. So not a ton of strikeouts, not a ton of walks. As we compare that to Perfect League, 9.4 K per 9 and 4.3 walks per 9. So there's a whole lot more batted ball incidences happening in bronze versus your main league and likely other tournament metas as well. Base runners are precious. So we've talked about this already with the triple slash and the 301 on base percentage, but you can see it even further as we look at the whips. So in bronze, the average pitcher whip is 1.2. So we're talking just a nudge over a base runner an inning, whereas in Perfect League, we're almost at a base runner and a half. So very big difference. When you get base runners, they're precious. You need to find a way to get them to score. And then lastly, we've got a meta wide open for bats. So as we compare this to Perfect League, like the team or the players that are locked onto Perfect League rosters, where there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's like you're running Ty Cobb. You want to win perfect, you're running Ty Cobb. You want to win perfect, you're running Tony Gwynn. The same cannot be said in bronze. There are no bats in bronze that you have to win. The players that are meta, the players that are you must have this guy to win, are really Ozzie Smith, and then you could argue on the catcher side. But other than that, really where you see low roster variety is at all of the premium defensive positions for reasons that are likely explainable above here. All right, so let's jump in. We are going to start with catcher. And the way that we're doing this is we're going to give you guys flavors. We're going to give you guys options, and we'll talk about them. But to not be myopic and only look at the highest WAR players or only look at the best gloves given the context here, we're going to look at for each position your best hitters. We're going to look at your best glove men, and then we're going to look at interesting third-party choices. And there are even other names that did not make the slide deck that I could see someone arguing effectively need to be within the consideration pool. So let's jump in. And Lipitor Kid is saying that I need to buy him dinner if he wins perfect without Gwyn or Cobb. Absolutely. I will absolutely buy you dinner when you win perfect without Gwyn or Cobb. That's a guarantee. All right, so let's talk catcher. So within catcher, I mean, big bats is all relative here. I probably should have some quotes over the big. But at catcher position, the guys who can actually drive some value with their bats are B.J. Surhoff and Gary Carter. So you can platoon it that way. And we've got kidneys with Surhoff here as well. So as I looked at my show notes here for Surhoff, he is the best catcher versus right-hand pitching. He's got the best average, best on-base percentage, best slugging versus pitching within among all left-handed hitting catchers. And then as we look at Carter, he leads all catchers in slugging, so lefty or righty. And then he also brings some good pinch hitting value. So one of the things that you need to be thinking about in the bronze meta, and we'll likely cover this during our pitching episode, is that 70% of all starts within the bronze tournament meta are made by a right-handed pitcher. So your right-handed bats, your bats that are just your short side platoons that are only out there facing left-handed starting pitching are not going to get that many starts. And so it's not a bad idea to be thinking about having guys that can come off the bench late and pinch hit into a moment that can make a big difference. And Gary Carter is a guy who can do that, as he leads all catchers within slugging. So Kidneys, what would you add to this, as you've got me mirrored with Surhoff?
For me, I think Surhoff is probably the only catcher when I look at, my model that just hits for the sake of hitting that I could reasonably play as a hitter and doesn't absolutely kind of crap the bed as a defensive player. So I think Surhoff is one of those guys you can make an argument for. Okay, I like more offense. Bronze doesn't score a lot of runs. I need another bat in my lineup. I'll play Surhoff. I think the issue is what chat is absolutely exploding about right now. Oh, there's no lava up there. Where's lava? Guys, lava's gonna be on the screen. Just wait a minute.
Don't placate them, Kidneys.
No, so Surhoff is a guy that, you can play with lava. I know you were talking to me about this morning, is what you like to do is you like to play him with lava. And I think that was kind of a cool idea you had. You can, talk some more about that when we hit him. And I don't think he's that bad. I am all about the catcher defense. I think it matters even more in an environment when low runs are scored. I would rather eliminate my opponent's scoring options when something like catcher I think is so valuable. So I am not a guy that's probably ever going to play Surhoff. But, hey, I mean, if that's what floats your boat, there you go.
So let's talk about the glove lovers. And this is where you see Mike Lava coming in, and I give him the moniker Hot Lava, while as Kidneys is choosing to call him Spanky. We'll have to get to that explanation next. And Kidneys and I are completely mirrored here. And the reasons are no surprise. I have got Lava with the best catcher ERA of all options within bronze meta, and also the best play percent. So play percent is a metric that many people have talked about and used, although I wouldn't say it's quite mainstream yet. And play percent is a mathematical calculation of all of the potential plays that out of the park labels as could be made. How many of them do they do? So this is not fielding percentage here, whereas most players are going to be in the high 90s at whatever position they're at here. This is of all of the balls that out of the park is labeling as plays that your player could get to, how many do they actually make? And at catcher, Hot Lava Lavalier here makes the most of them. And as we look at Boone, I said that Lava was number 1 in catcher ERA. Boone is number 2. Now, his bugaboo here is that he really doesn't bring much to the plate. His triple slash is 243, 303, 301. So he's giving you what comes out to be about league average on base percentage, but well beneath league average slug. Now, what thoughts can you share about the glove lovers that you have with Spanky, Lavalier, and Boone?
So Spanky's his actual like real nickname when he played. I don't know the context behind that. I just find it amusing, so I included it when I saw you had a nickname for it. Um, so I love lava. I mean, who doesn't run lava? If you have one on your team, if you don't, you got to go pick one up. If you're taking bronze seriously, he is so overstated. He's a fantastic hitter, and he has superb defense behind the plate. The question is, what do you do with your lava? And this was where you and I had a little debate earlier when we were going over this. Is do you run a more offensive bat behind him? Do you run another complement V right with him, or do you run another glove? I like to run another glove and platoon the weak side, and I think the best combination for that is for sure for me Bob Boone. And Bob Boone has a glove very comparable to Lava's. He's a right-handed batter, so he favors well against lefty pitching. And his hitting stats, to me, on paper, look okay. I know observed data doesn't do Boone too many favors, but I feel like that's because a lot of people pre-Lava were playing him V right and on both sides of the plate. So that's, I think, one of the things, tournament issues, you have to take a lot of your data with a grain of salt and try to think about how players are practically being played versus how they play out in a more like model specific approach. And my model isn't super optimized for bronze at the moment. So, you have to, I have to take my own stuff with a grain of salt and try and interpret as well. So, but I still think, in my opinion, in a low scoring environment, I'd rather boost my pitchers even more and try and maximize them that way with Boone.
Yeah, and to the debate you're talking about, it's no secret that catchers get tired faster than any other position, and tournaments don't have days off. So if you have Boone as your short side platoon guy, he will play plenty versus right. Given that stat that I dropped on you earlier, that 70% of all starts in bronze are made by right-hand pitchers. So let's say you get into a 6-game series and you're up against someone who starts their rotation with 4 righties, it's very likely that by game 4 of that series, Boone is out there versus that right-hand starter. And so that's why I think that there are legs to considering a Surhoff Lava platoon with Lava as the D-sub on your Surhoff starts. Let's talk about some other guys that are unique and interesting. So I submit 2 here. I've got Roger Bresnahan and I've got Jim Sundberg. You've got Sundberg as well. And the reason that I bring up Bresnahan is that he's got a couple of things that are unique about him. He has got very good base running, so he's going to be able to steal a ton of bases and drive significant BSR. He's at 4.2 BSR per 600, which is miles better than any other catcher. He also touts a 320 on base. Not only is that well above average for catcher, the catcher average is 295, but the league average was 301, as we saw on our prior slide. So Bresnahan is going to get on base, he's going to steal a bunch of bases, and then to top all of that off, he's actually got some backup, some okay-ish second base defense. I don't know the use case for how you would be able to use that a ton, but it's there and interesting nonetheless. And Sundberg has like Insano level catcher defense. He's got incredible catcher ERA, but he's really a horrendous bat. The triple slash I've got on him is 192, 238, 299. What else can you add to that?
I used to play Bresnahan way back when I first started playing bronze at like the beginning of Perfect Team, just because catcher was such a limited position back then in bronze, and he added some flexibility, so I thought that was pretty cool. But no, I think Sundberg is really cool. I know there's some people laughing like dishing at Coleman Destroyer. As the night goes on, you're going to hear more and more my hate for Coleman Aspire. I do not like Coleman as a card, and we're going to probably elaborate on that more and more as we get into left field and such. But Sundberg, I think, is really cool just because I was talking about how high value catcher defense, and he is the best defensive catcher. So maybe you want a really defensive bronze team and you want to just say, I'm going to beat you 1-0 every single game. Maybe Sundberg's that card for you to play with your lava. So, I mean, it's always lava. But it's just what do you play with your lava? So I think Sunberg is definitely an option there. But I see a lot of people in chat saying their boon is out hitting their lava on a platoon. So maybe we'll see those boon numbers shoot up as he gets platooned properly moving forward.
Absolutely. And I see some questions in the chat about Craig Biggio. Now, Biggio used to be able to carry the title of the best hitting bronze catcher. That was true way back in May. It is not true anymore. His on-base percentage has sunk beneath 300, well beneath 300. So he's not quite an option there anymore. And I thought I saw another name floated out. Brian Harper. So Brian Harper does hit for some power, but his he must have dual eligibility or something because his play percentage is super low. That can't be accurate for a catcher. So someone in my data set must be using him somewhere else, which is getting his play percent super low. But Brian Harper doesn't bubble up too high within my data. All right, let's move on. Let's go to first base. Big bats. I'm submitting Jose Martinez and Daniel Murphy. And then Kidneys is dropping Matty Alou and Iron Card Vic Power. Can't wait for that explanation, but I'll start with mine. So Jose, number 1 OPS in bronze. So we've talked about how it's hard to score runs. We've talked about how all the hitters stink. And here is the single best hitter in bronze by OPS within my data set, which is now around 100,000 lines of hitting data. And so that means something to me. He's number 3 in WAR at first base. And just you don't go wrong with Jose Martinez. Now, optimally, likely platooned. And we've talked about how short side platoons don't get nearly as many at-bats as you'd like. But as a pinch hit off the bench, when you have a right-handed starting pitcher that you're facing or a starter versus left, it's definitely not a bad bat to have on the roster. Now, as we look at Daniel Murphy, he is the best left-handed hitting OPS first baseman, and he's slug heavy. So his triple slash line is weighted towards slugging, and as we've talked about before, slugging is hard to come by within the bronze level. So Kidneys, why don't you walk us through Alou and Power?
I just think Alou has arguably the best V-right bat in bronze. I think when you're just looking at back of card, he's somebody that really stands out to me as somebody that should be heavily utilized. And it's weird because he's a stock center fielder, but he actually has stock first base rating. And he's playable at first base. It's good enough, in my opinion, where you can play him there instead of defense. And I think he's just pretty good. From my experience playing with him, he's done pretty well for me so far in the limited time I've played him, and I've actually just grown quite to like him. Now, Vic Power is one that a lot of people are like, what is Kidney doing here? Throwing an iron card in bronze. This is not the first time I've done this. I used to run Charlie Root and the other iron, Nelson Bryles, in bronze as well, and they were actually pretty good for me way back in the day. Not that I recommend that, but a Vic Power, if you just look at raw back of card, the left, and you didn't say this is an iron card, you would be like, wow, this is a really good V-left profile. I mean, he has, if I pull it up here, he has 73 contact, 59 power, and 108 avoid Ks V-left. That's pretty impressive. His BABIP's a 50. And yeah, I mean, he's not that slow either. He's got, 68 base running, 65 stealing. So overall, I mean, Vic Power is just pretty impressive to me, and he's got fantastic defense. So I think Vic Power is a card that's like just being criminally underutilized because, his overall is a 59. And he's not even that bad V-right either. So I think in a platoon, Vic Power is a fantastically underutilized card right now.
Here's what I'll say about Vic Power. The average first baseman strikes out 13.2% of the time, and within bronze, Vic Power's strikeout rate is 4%. And as we talk about home runs, the average is 2.3%. He's at 2.7%. So he's making a lot of contact. He's hitting for some power. I think the BABIP does hurt him a bit, and that drags down his overall triple slash line. As we jump up to Matty Alou, Where he stands out is a very high average. So the average first baseman hits 259, and Alou comes in at 277 with a decent, slightly below average on base percentage, but a slightly above average slug. So Alou definitely not a bad option there. I like this. I'm the spreadsheet guy. I'm the numbers guy. I'm so used to you being in that role. The student has become the teacher.
I'm going to make you look at some real weird cards tonight.
All right, let's move on to glove lovers. And so at first base, I submit Mike A. Marshall, Joe Mauer, and then we've got another hit for Vic Power and Joe Mauer from Kidneys. I'll let you lead off this time.
I was talking about Vic Power, just briefly touched on the glove. The man has 70 range, 49 error, and then 70 arm, 70 turn double play. What? He can defensive sub for you at first base as your lefty first baseman. I mean, just crazy. Complements kind of with Alou. I play them as a platoon because Alou doesn't have the best first baseman statistics. Vic Power is crazy. I think Vic Power is just a super overstated card. And Mauer is just one of those cards that I was just looking for a second card to put on this list here. And he's pretty just solidly statted across the board. And he just overall has some higher than average stats. I think across the board as a hitter and as a glove. So nothing too special there. There aren't a lot of above average first basemen defensively for bronze, but Mauer is just pretty good, I think, overall. So.
Yeah, and as we switch over to my guys here, Mike A. Marshall, he's got an 86.1% play percentage. So he's the number one defensive first baseman, hands down. And he does so while also hitting the ball over the fence. So he's got a 4.1% home run rate on a league average of 2.3. Now, the problem with Marshall is his horrible 268 on base percentage. So you need to decide for yourself if you're willing to sacrifice basically an out machine in Marshall, getting that he's never going to really get on base, in exchange for him hitting the ball over the fence and giving you league-leading defense at first base. Now, Mauer is the number 2 play percentage guy, number 2 defender at first base by my numbers, and he's going to do so with a 328 on base percentage. So he's not going to give you that same defense. He's also not going to hit the ball over the fence. He's very on base percentage heavy in terms of his offensive profile here. But those are two flavors of what you can do if you really want to lean defense. You can go with over the fence power. You can go with on base to go with that very solid glove. Next, we've got some unique options here. So we've got Spezio. And Spezio, I call him unique in that he's balanced. He's a switch hitter. We've already talked tonight about how switch hitters get a bit of a boost in that they never have to face the pitcher's dominant side, or rarely do, only in the case of reverse split pitchers. And in addition to being a splitty, he's just kind of good at everything. He's got a slightly above average on base, slightly above average slug, slightly above average defense. So Spezio is just kind of like, if you want to go vanilla, and if you just want a guy to be reliable and a guy to give you slightly better than league average production, he's your guy. Now, Stapleton is probably more unique by the true definition of the word unique, in that he's giving you stock defense at second base and defense that can actually back up second base for when your Kaz Matsui or your whomever gets tired. And so that's a unique value that he can bring, and he also does that with bringing a plus bat to the table. So he's got significant slugging, and it can be a difference maker, especially against left-handed pitching. Now, on your side, you've got Spezio and Torrey. Tell us why.
Spezio is just like you said, he's so well-rounded. He's kind of overstated for a card. I think the only issue for me personally with Spezio is he's a little bit too over well-rounded in the fact that his BABIP suffers a little bit from it, where he has so much power. But like you talked about, power is a rarity in Brown, so it's not necessarily the worst thing. Frank Torre is a card that really interests me because on paper, he may just have arguably the best bat on this page. The issue with Frank Torre is Frank Torre has no defense. And that's kind of the problem with Torre, is he just doesn't really play the ball well at all. So Torre has like 31 range. He makes up for it with good height, but it's like kind of one of those things where you're not really sure. Torre also has a really low BABIP, but he does mash right-handed pitching. He absolutely mashes it. So it's kind of one of those trade-offs where you got to decide what you want to do with that. And there you go.
Very good. Moving on to second base. So let's start with big bats. And I've got some names here that you probably haven't seen a bunch of, and that's because people are normally not going big bat up the middle of the field. But let me tell you about a couple players that you probably haven't thought too much about in the past. So Mark Bellhorn, he is the number 2 OPS second baseman. He's a switch hitter as well, so he gets that same boost there, and he hits bombs. He is hitting home runs at a 3.9% rate at a position that is averaging hitting them at a 0.9% rate. So he's 4x the position average in home runs. Now, why doesn't everyone run him? It's because he's a terrible defender, and we'll talk more about that later. Next big bat here is Mike Sharperson, which has darn near the best on-base percentage within bronze. In my data, I've got 1,600 plate appearances of him at 350 on-base percentage at a positional average of 295. So 55 extra points above the positional average. Again, the glove is not there. So there could be ways to get these guys into your lineups without necessarily deploying them on a day-to-day basis. But they are the big bats of second base. Now you've got Rath and Fletcher here. Tell us why.
Because I refuse to put players on here that I would never play. I'm a bit of an elitist that way. So I filtered bronze cards, 80 or higher second base rating, and these were my best bats. And I think these two are the best second base platoon. And I think you're kind of trolling a little bit if you're not playing these guys at second base. And I know you don't, so we can talk about that. But I think the Rath Fletcher platoon is just so good. I think it's time and true tested. And I don't really think anything completes. I would love to see us get an actual great bronze second baseman so I could stop playing them and play something else. But you also messed up my tagline. Fletcher is the right hand of Rath because he's right-handed. And I'm kind of sad now that it's not that way. But that's okay.
Not all of your jokes can land. All right, let's move on to the glove lovers. This is where I've got Rath and Fletcher, and you've got Rath and Fletcher, and I've even got Fletcher incorrectly labeled as a left-handed batter on my side of the table, so we'll not pay attention to that. And then for these guys here, I have got Rath as the second best play percentage of all second basemen, and I've got Fletcher as the number 3 play percentage of all second basemen, but number 1 WAR. So Scott Fletcher is registering more WAR than any other second base option. Now, the problem with both of these guys is their on-base percentage sucks. Rath's on-base percentage is 291. Fletcher's is 281. Now, Rath is even worse with the slugging somehow at 280, whereas Fletcher will go ahead and get into some extra base hits from now and then, 359 on his slug there. But these guys absolutely are the complementary logical platoon at second base. They're going to scoop up most balls that go their way. And there's an argument to be made, and I think you've started making it, that these guys are the way that you should cover second base. I'll reserve my opinion on that until we get to our next click here. But tell me why you've got these guys as your glove lovers.
The reason I have them as glove lovers is because second base is such a heavy defensive position, and we're talking about before how run-starved bronze is, and you really need elite defense in bronze to, compensate for that, to really keep yourself in the game. And Rath is just elite. He's really, in my opinion, I think the top defensive option for second base. And he also hits very well against right-handed pitching compared to the other second basemen in the pool. Like I said, I would love to see other second basemen. If Chris is watching, give us some other second basemen for bronze. It'd be really cool if we got some other defensive options. And then Fletcher is just, I think overall, like if you didn't want to run a platoon, you run Fletcher as the better option overall. I still think you pretty much have to platoon the two, but he's a little bit weaker defensively, but he is better against the left-handed pitching, and they just kind of complement each other pretty well.
So I'm going to try to deconstruct your argument as we talk about our unique options here. So I'll start with Kaz. So Kaz has as good a glove as the two guys we just talked about, Rath and Fletcher. In fact, in my data set, he has the number one play percent of all second basemen. And in addition to that glove, he's also got plus BSR. So he's a great base runner. He can steal bases. And then he's also a switch hitter. So you don't have to worry about platoon concerns. And in addition to him, I've got Breivik Valera, who really is not listed here as a realistic choice to start at second base, but rather as someone who can fill out that utility role. And he's got positional eligibility across the infield and hits enough to be interesting and add some value on the days that he does need to play. He's at a 309 OBP, which is miles better than every other name you see on here in the glove category or in the unique category. And as we talk about the debate that you just started of Rath Fletcher platoon versus Kaz every day, I think that you need to take into account roster size. So if Rath isn't going to hit, and if Fletcher isn't going to hit, and if Matsui isn't going to hit, is it better to waste 2 roster spots or is it better to waste 1? And so Rath Fletcher was my platoon on that roster that I teased at the very beginning, and I ran him for ran that combo for 7+ months. So I'm not here to tell you Rath Fletcher's bad. I'm not even here to tell you that it's wrong. I'm just here to tell you that as I've reconstructed my team, I made the conscious decision that I'm getting very similar bat production no matter who I've got out there. And I'm going to choose to do that with one lineup spot, and one lineup spot that when they do get on base, which isn't frequently, but when they do get on base can actually add additional excess value with their legs, especially if we're talking about down in a lineup who, let's say Kaz Matsui is hitting 9th and he does strike lightning and get on base for like he does to the 27% of the time that he does that, then he can go ahead and steal a base as we're leading into our second time around the lineup, and someone like a Nemo Leopold or a Roger Cedeno can go ahead and knock him in. So that's my argument against your platoon. Let's hear your counter argument.
I think the reason I have that roster slot and you don't is because I know some people were talking earlier in the Discord about running 13 pitchers. I don't do that, and I also don't platoon center field for similar reasons that you just talked about. But given that I don't platoon center field, I have that open roster spot to be able to pull this off. And I think I get more merit out of not platooning my center field than I do out of not platooning second base, because I think Matsui is just so bad. I would rather platoon my second base, not platoon my center field.
Would you tell me I was a liar if I told you that I've got 74,000 plate appearances that say Matsui has a higher OPS than Rath?
No, because I guarantee you there are people that are playing Rath out of a platoon, right? And this is the issue with observed in tourneys, is just that, you can easily find plenty of data, but you just got to try and contextualize it. And the problem is that just Rath is just on paper, I think he has the best glove, right? I know you said Matsui is the best glove, but on paper, Rath is the best glove. And so the issue then becomes, I've done this. I used to do this where I just played Rath at second base because he was just the best glove, right? And I wanted that extra slot. So being that I just played Rath full time, I mean, that's going to tank his numbers because he doesn't hit lefties at all, right? So I think that's fair, in that certainly outside of a platoon, maybe Matsui is better than Rath. Yeah, that's fair too. But, I think in a platoon, I don't think there's a question in my mind that Rath is better than Matsui now.
And I see a question in the chat about Wally Backman. So Wally Backman got a ton of run early bronze meta, oftentimes as a DH because his glove does hold him back a bit. For context perspective, he makes 71% of plays at second base, whereas someone like a Matsui is closer to 82%. So those are a lot of balls that you're leaving behind. However, Backman does have a 322 on base, so you're definitely getting something in exchange for him being out there and giving you poor glove. But I don't see as many teams running him anymore.
You need the defense, basically. Bronze has kind of tightened down since the early days in the meta, and how There's a lot of good teams that win a lot now, and if you're not running that elite defense, you're going to get punished too much. So I wouldn't even consider Backman as a second baseman. Like I said, remember, I filtered by 80 defense minimum, and I wouldn't even consider somebody without 90. Crits is, I think, too weak of a hitter to be considered. I just think the Fletcher Wrath is better, or even I would probably pick Matsui over Crits personally.
And we've got a question for Delino DeShields. DeShields is in here. He's in the middle of the pack from a WAR perspective. He does get to more balls than Backman. He's about 5 points better on the play percent there. But he's not quite a good enough hitter to be driving excess value with the bat, and not quite a good enough fielder to be pushing himself up towards the meta there. So I wouldn't recommend Delino DeShields at this point. Let's go to shortstop. So we are going to spend a lot of time on this position because we've got a lot to break down. Oh, wait, what's this? Oh, nope, nothing to break down. Just use Ozzy. This is the open and shut case of bronze. Just use Ozzy. Don't need to get cute here. Ozzy is the one and only answer here. I remember early on, Rabbit Marinville had some run. We had some people with Joe Tinker. Let me look at the numbers here. Roger Peckinpah, Wagner. These are all guys that have been run in the past, but Ozzy is the guy. He's greater than a full percentage point better at making plays than anyone else on this list. He's driving more WAR than anyone. He's not that much worse of a hitter than someone like a Joe Tinker. So just use Ozzy. Just use Ozzy and sleep well.
And people are asking in chat, what do you do when Ozzy gets tired? This is where really your utility player, which normally ends up probably being like your third base option, comes into play. So somebody like a David Fletcher or a Breivik Valera is just going to play a game or two for you over the course of a tournament. It's not the biggest deal. You could also subscribe to the fact that position rating doesn't really matter that much. I haven't run numbers on that like identically to know. Some people just slap Wrath in there and call it a day. I don't think you need to run a dedicated backup shortstop on your roster. I would probably advise against that and run somebody like Fletcher or Breivik.
Yeah, so your options for people that can back up short are, like Kidneys just said, your David Fletcher, so not the Fletcher that we were just talking about at second base, a different Fletcher Alive card. Your Breivik Valera, the new card that dropped last week, Caesar Tovar. These are guys that come with stock shortstop defense. I would not recommend throwing like a Rabbit Marinville or like a legit shortstop just for the sole purpose of backing up Ozzy on the 2 games of tournament that he needs you to back him up. So I would go with someone who's got stock in multiple positions and a bat that's not horrible. Because if he's going to be on my bench, I'm going to want him to be in play to pinch hit for a guy like Ozzy when we're in the bottom of the 9th and there's 2 outs and I need someone to get a hit. Third base time. Let's start with some big bats. And we're actually in a position here where these are legitimately big bats. These are legitimately bats that can win games for you and can be among league leaders in your tournaments here. And I've got Harvey Kuehl and Eddie Kazak, and then Kidneys is bringing Kazak and Dave Cash, as he likes to call Baby Cap Anson. So we'll let him stand up for that in just a moment here. But let me first talk about my guys. So Kuehl and Kazak. Kuehl is number 2 in OPS at third. He's absolutely deadly versus left. So his observed stat line will likely only improve as you hone in those plate appearances to be just versus left-handed pitching. And he's also got stock corner outfield defense, which provides some additional utility. Now, none of his defense anywhere is good. He's not a defensive replacement. He's not even someone you want to be out there, period. But having the stock defense and being able to be placed out there in a time of need or in an offensive type build, is certainly within the realm of doable. Now, as we talk about Kazak, I said Kuehl was number 2 in OPS. Kazak's number 1, and he does so with more slugging. And he has that same bad defense. I don't know that he's got stock anywhere else. I think he might just be third base, maybe some bad second base, but he's more of a hitting option there. And Kidneys, you've got Kazak and Cash. Tell us why.
I mean, I have Kazak for like the same reason you do. I love Kuhn as well. I think Kuhn is one of those like low-key utility players where he's not great defensively, but you can kind of just slap him around and play him at DH when he comes up. So kind of like Pete Rose we were talking about earlier for Diamond. He's kind of almost the Pete Rose of bronze on like a micro scale where he can play third and corner outfield. Kazak's really good, but he's got defense worse than Kuhn, I think. It's really bad, but his bat is insane V left, and it's kind of okay V right. So he's pretty playable just for the bat. Third base is one of those positions in bronze where if I'm going to sacrifice a position to get a good at bat out there, I would probably sacrifice third base, is what I would do. However, Dave Cash is like my first love right now. Dave Cash is a second baseman with third base eligibility, and he is a right-handed hitter with true amazing reverse splits. That's why I called him Cap Anson, because he is just out of this world right-handed hitter. He's got really great BABIP. He's got great avoid Ks, high contact. He's got okay eye. And my results with him so far have been pretty great. So I'm really liking Dave Cash. Probably a platoon only is his weak side, but he also has really solid defense. He's not fully trained at third, but I mean, so he'll play probably a little bit over his 53 rating, but he's pretty good.
So we've talked about bats. Now let's talk about some gloves. I'm bringing Jack Hanahan to the conversation and Chuck Dressen, and you are bringing Ken Oberkfell. And so I'll start with Hanahan here. So Hannah is a terrible hitter. I'll say that up front. His triple slash is 221, 285 on the on base, 362 on the slug, but he is the number one WAR generator among third basemen in my data set that have over 10,000 plate appearances. So that definitely says something. And he's also the number one play percentage guy. So of all balls hit to third base, Jack Hanahan makes more of those plays than anyone else. As we talk about Dressen, he's got a similar play percentage. He's slightly lower in the WAR department, but he does so with an above 300 OBP. So with Dressen, you're obviously going from left-handed bat to right-handed bat, and we've talked about how most of the starters are right-handed, so you're walking right into the platoon disadvantage there if you choose Dressen. But his data is suggesting that he's going to be able to get on base more frequently than Hannah here. So I could definitely see the argument to go with the defensive build and to choose Dressen over Hannah. Tell us why you chose Oberkfell.
I chose Oberkfell because I wanted a defensive bat that could like really hit still, and he seemed to really be the only one that could qualify by my metrics. If you look, that's why I have one person on the screen, not two. Oberkfell can hit pretty well, and his defense is pretty high, and so I think if you're looking for kind of a middle of the pack option or you don't want to sacrifice defense at third base, I think Oberkfell is still really good. I see a lot of people bringing up we didn't have Frank Gustine as one of our big bats. I'm not that high on Gustine. I am of the volition a lot more than most people that avoid K is still pretty important in bronze. And Gustine has a very good V left bat, and so I don't want to take that away from him, but I don't think his V right is good at all. And so I think he's very platoon heavy, and that might be skewing his data a little bit if people are playing on both sides. So maybe he's actually pretty good. But yeah, I don't know. He doesn't really super stand out to me. That's just my opinion on Gustine.
Yeah, from a plate appearance perspective, Gustine is absolutely the number one used third baseman. I've got 44,000 plate appearances of him. My next highest is 21,000 of Oberkfell. So definitely a lot of Gustine out there. Not my cup of tea. Because I personally don't think that he gives you enough of the bat to make up for what he doesn't bring you with the glove. But I won't fault someone for going that route. Next, let's talk about some unique guys. And we'll start with my favorite card from our This Week in Perfect Team broadcast from last week, Cesar Tovar. And the reason that I like Cesar Tovar is because of positional eligibility. Everywhere that you could want it, he's got it, including very good defense in center field. So as you look at backing up your center fielder, Tovar's got good range, and I think he's either fully or near fully trained in center. And so that range is mostly going to play. And so I like having him back up my Darren Erstad. So I'll go ahead and tease that's upcoming here in a couple of slides. And I also like him being able to back up Ozzie Smith. You know, we talked about needing to have someone to play when Ozzie's out of the lineup, and I don't mind Tovar being there. Is he going to be good at shortstop? No. Is he going to hit better than Ozzie? Yes. And he's also going to steal some bases. And he's also got reverse splits. So as we've talked about, most pitchers in bronze are right-handed, and he happens to have better backup card ratings versus right-hand pitchers. So given what is going to be asked of Tovar, I like him for a number of different reasons, and that's why I've got him listed here. Another unique option for you at third base is George Moriarty. And Moriarty is an absolute fiend on the base paths. So very much a plus BSR rating here. It's going to steal a ton of bases. Now the problem is getting on base. Only a 272 on base average. So he's clocking at 5.9 BSR per 600 plate appearances, and he's doing it all in so few opportunities because he's not getting on base. He's got a decent glove to go with it. I've seen some people have some good success with Moriarty there, so definitely another option to consider. And this is where, Kidneys, you drop in Valera. Tell us why.
Just a note on Moriarty. I think you kind of touched it with the on base. I just don't think he hits the ball. I mean, his base running surely elite, but I just struggle to see where he gets on there. But Breivik is my boy. Breivik has been my boy for forever, and I will die on this hill that Breivik does Tovar way better than Tovar does Tovar. Breivik does not have as good defense in the outfield, but what Breivik does is Breivik actually hits the ball. Tovar, you said, is a righty with reverse splits. The issue with Tovar being a righty, though, that you want to play the righty is, well, he's going to get the strong side of the pitcher splits. And I don't think his hitting profile is good enough to actually make up for it and hit the ball v righties. Versus Breivik is a switch hitter. So he actually has really good stats versus lefties. And he has good enough, in my opinion, to play both sides of the ball. And not only that, he has really good defense at third base and position eligibility at second base, shortstop, left field, and right field. So I think Breivik Valera is a fantastic option. I have him doing just a bit better than David Fletcher, which is most people's go-to utility option pre-Tovar. So I think Breivik Valera is like criminally underrated across the board. I think he's been underrated for forever. I've been telling everybody who talks to me about bronze about Breivik for Valeras for as long as I can. It's just a card you need to look at if you're playing bronze.
Check out Breivik Valera, says your Kidneys. All right, let's move to left field. We'll start with some big bats here, and I've got a repeat. I've got Harvey Kuhn for the second time, and I'm marrying him with Bill Buckner. And Kidneys is bringing to the table Nemo Leopold and Cuckoo Christensen. And I've already talked about Kuhn, so I'll just talk about Buckner here. He is the number one OPS lefty bat out in left field, and as we know, it's hard to tap into. It's hard to tap into run scoring and run generation, and Buckner just happens to do it best as a left-handed hitter out in left field, a non-premium defensive position, and that's why I've got him there. Why do you have Nemo and Cuckoo?
All right, get them up, boys. It's BAPIP time. So what happens to my BAPIP formula when you have no power is it breaks it. Just straight up, it breaks it. The issue is if you have sub 12, I don't actually have the data to run super accurate numbers on sub 12 power. But when we revamped it, we did a little bit of it, enough that I'm confident to come out and throw out some numbers and say that Nemo and Cuckoo are really, really, really good bats. The problem in bronze is consistently getting on base and moving runners around, putting balls in play against better defenses and better pitching. And I think Nemo and Cuckoo are going to be your best options for that. I think they might be the best bats in bronze for consistency. I think The right, they're crazy options. I think they're overstated. Their defense is a little bit on the weaker end, but this is a position I'm going to sacrifice defense to put a bat in every time because I think these guys are absolutely your top tier of bats in bronze.
Let's move on to the gloves. And I've got Vince Coleman and Warren Cromartie here, and you've got Vince Coleman, and in parentheses saying, don't do it. Don't do Coleman. So we'll get to you in a second to explain yourself there. First, I'll talk about Coleman. So Coleman is logging an unbelievable 12 BSR out of left field. He is getting on bases, and he is creating runs while on them with stolen bases, by taking the extra base, by scoring from first on a double, by scoring from second on every single you can imagine. And he's also making every play you can dream about in left field. He's got an 85% play percent at a position that's averaging 81. Now, where he's not strongest is actually getting on base. He's at 304 on base, which, as we know, is just slightly above league average. And this is left field, and there's only so many positions where you can actually get bats into the lineup, and left field happens to be one of them. So it's not a slam dunk for Coleman if you're looking at your lineup saying, hey, there's just not enough run production here. I need to figure out how to squeeze more into it. But if you want to go defensive build, there is no other consideration than Coleman. I've got Cromartie here. He's not really a worthwhile consideration. He's the second best defender in left, but his offense is so significantly worse, and he's not giving you any of that value on the bases. So you can go ahead and forget he's here for all intents and purposes. Now, Kidneys, tell us where and why you have a vendetta against Vince Coleman.
So I'll rant about Vince Coleman, and you can try and fix my camera that died. I switched it to the other one. The problem with Vince Coleman is he just doesn't hit baseball. And even though he's a switch hitter, and his contact's kind of okay, and his BABIP's actually really high because he's got low power and low Ks, I just don't have him hitting much because his Ks are so low. He's actually still probably going to strike out in bronze quite a bit. He's not really going to hit that much, and his speed is good and his defense is good. So yes, speed, his run generation, his running around bases, blah, 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 blah. I don't think left field defense really means that much in bronze because your overall gap values are way lower than they should be, and your overall BABIP values are actually pretty high because everything is literally inflated because of how BABIP is not really a stat like compared to contact, right? So you're going to have a lot. My guess would be you have a lot of infield type single hits. And my guess is you don't need Coleman's defense and that you're just kind of creating double play machine. And so maybe that's why you want his speed, but I would much rather, if you're comparing Coleman to what I just said were some of the best bats in the game in left field, I just don't think I would ever play him over them. And that's my opinion on it. And I don't think he's efficient. And there you go.
Seems to me like you didn't have the courage or the guts to say that on camera.
I have my other camera on.
Oh, is it a me problem at this point?
It's a you problem. My other camera is working. It is. Okay. It should be in the window for you. So,
all right, let's see.
I need a new camera battery, so I will buy one for next week. I thought I could get away with it. I thought it was just because last week was so long, but then Chris did a short stream, and now I've died again, so.
You weren't ready for the bronze tourney bonanza.
I was not. I think Gittick stole my soul again.
All right, we move on to unique left fielders, and I've got Nemo. I've got your Nemo that you listed as a big bet here under the unique. I've also got Roger Cedeno. And these are two players that I love to have in my bronze lineup. And let me tell you why. So Nemo is the OBP machine. I don't know this for a fact. I'm guessing, though, that he is the number one OBP option within bronze level. He's at 355 on the on base. The positional average is 307. And in a league where people are not on base, where pitchers have a 1.2 whip, just getting on base is a huge asset. So whether he's left field, whether he's DH, that's going to be a decision that you'll need to get to at some point. But I just love having someone that gets on base as frequently as he does in the lineup in a run environment like this one. Now, he does not slug. He is not a big bat because he does not slug. His slugging, I believe, is even less than his OBP. So it's something like a 355 OBP, maybe 345 slug, somewhere around there. So he's getting a lot of singles. He's getting a lot of walks, but he's getting on base, and that is valued at this level. Now, for Cedeno, he's also getting on base, at a slightly lower clip. So whereas Leopold was 355, Cedeno's down at 340, but when he gets on base, he is a terror on the base paths, stealing tons of bases, taking extra bases. He's at a 9.6 BSR per 600, which definitely is less than Coleman's 12, but it's still very, very elite. And then as far as the position is concerned, he is number 3 in left field WAR. So these are two unique options for left field that I love them both. Tell me why you like Buckner.
Buckner's just like really great bat. Like you said earlier, I think he's one of the best bats, if not the best bat for the position. Just the issue with Buckner is like literally no defense. He's like 54, 45, 30 range error arm. So he can't catch anything. So if you're sticking him out there, it would be like, let's run Buckner Kuhn as my outfield, and I'm just going to try and outmash the pitching. So it's an option. It's certainly viable. I think it's viable. I'm probably going to try it someday. I'm just going to try an offensive max bronze team and see if I can do anything with it. But yeah, it's cool, but probably not super practical, no.
Very good. We go to center field now. And we're going to start with the big bats. And I did put the quotations here for big bats because center field is terrible. Center field is a wasteland and lack of offensive production. The average center fielder in bronze is slashing 255, 288. Can't read my own handwriting here. 3-something. It's not good. Trust me, it's not good. But of the bats at center that could actually go out there, I've chosen Vic Davalillo and Gabe Kapler as the two to pay the most attention to. Now, Vic slashes 264, 295, 367, so better than center field average in all three categories, but a slightly below average glove. It's not a bad glove. He's not a butcher out in center field. He's not gonna leave you really dying from a range perspective. In fact, Vic was kind of the counterpunch to Coco Crisp in bronze meta for the longest time. And Vic used to hit better than he does now, but he was absolutely a 1A and 1B consideration with Crisp for many, many months on end, and you still do see some people running Vic today. Now, Kapler has the highest OPS of all options in center field, but I don't consider him a real viable starter option. I'd have to check his stock defense to know if he could potentially fill in a utility role out in the outfield. But from an OPS perspective, from a bat perspective, he is the highest OPS of all center fielders. Now you've got Davalillo and Crisp. Tell us why.
I have Davalillo. Thank you for saying that first, because that is not how I pronounce it in my head. I have him first just because he's the old school goat. He deserves a shout out. Before we had like the big cards, or before everybody hopped on the Coco Crisp train, before we had the Puckett and the Erstad, we were running Davalillo, and he's a really good card. So it's good, but he's probably past his time. The reason I put Crisp as a bat is because when we search by the big three, the bronze center fielders with 100 range plus, Crisp has the highest on base percent. And that's not great, but it's what it is. So I would take Coco Crisp if I was going to pick one of those by hitting value. Not that I'm going to do that, but that's what I would do.
Very good. Let's talk about gloves. And this is where I've got Erstad and Crisp, and you've got Erstad and Puckett. And so from a statistics perspective, I've got Erstad with the best play percent of balls hit to center field. He gets to more of them than anyone, and Crisp is the second best. but Crisp is a worse hitter than Erstad, so effectively just a worse mousetrap. Erstad is across the board better with a bat perspective than Crisp. So of the two options, I would recommend Erstad over Crisp. Now you've got Erstad and Puckett. Tell us why.
I have Erstad and Puckett because I think if you're going to run center field in bronze, this is what you consider is Erstad and Puckett. I don't think it's Crisp, even though I think his on-base percentages actually should be higher. But Erstad and Puckett, you can platoon them or you can run them solo. I actually think if you run them solo, Puckett's the answer here. And that's kind of what I've come to run myself as Puckett. I think stats are probably a little messed up on who's running who platooned, who's running who overall. But Erstad's definitely the best glove. So maybe you value that a little bit more. But I like Puckett's bat a little bit more myself. And it's one of those scenarios I think he's not better running than Crisp, but he's better running than Erstad. So I would rather have Puckett as well in the bases. So
next, we've got our unique guys. And I've got an off-the-beaten-path one with Otis Nixon and Kirby Puckett. And let me tell you what I've got on Nixon here. So I've only got 1,100 plate appearances. It's not a ton. But in those 1,100 plate appearances, he's got a 310 OBP, which stands out as 15 points better than average at the position. He's also a value on the bases. So a unique counter option and a switch hitter, and we've talked about how much we love switch hitters already. So just something to consider. I mean, I'm running Erstad. I haven't given Nixon a plate appearance, so I'm throwing him up here to raise your awareness, not necessarily to pound the table for him. And then Puckett, I find Puckett to be more unique and interesting than I find him to be my choice for the position. He does have the plus glove, but he also just never, ever walks. He's at 1.7% walks from a plate appearance perspective, and that just sinks all of his offensive numbers. His on base is sinking as a result of it. He really needs to hit his way on base, or he's not getting on base, and he's not hitting enough to really do enough for me. You've got Rick Miller. Tell us why.
I think I was talking with API, and I believe Rick Miller is technically his best observed center field bat. It's just the glove's not there. So it's just one of those weird options. And so it's just, something to throw out there, but realistically, I'd probably never run him just because the glove's not there.
Yeah, Rick Miller, I do have him beneath Erstad and Crisp and Puckett from a play percentage. All right, we move on to right field. So let's talk about some big bats in right field. I've got Nelson Cruz and Jim Eisenreich, and you've got Greg Gross. So let's talk about Cruz. I've got him on here. Not a ton of people run him, and maybe that's warranted, but he is the number one slugging, I believe, in the game. Definitely at the position. Maybe in the game. He's at 469 on the slug in a league that averages 366. So 100 points more slugging than the average bronze hitter, and nearly 84 points more slugging than the average right fielder. So definitely brings a lot to the table that not a lot of other people do. Now he does so with a bad on base percentage. He is 276 on base, so you're really selling out for power here. You're selling out for the contact that he does make to go over the fence and to win those low-scoring games for you. Defensively, he's not a train wreck. He's at 78.5% plays made versus a positional average of 77.6, so slightly above average there. So if you want to have him off your bench as a pinch hitter, and then on the rare occasion when he gets to start versus a left-handed starter, you have a decent chance of him poking one over the fence. He's certainly an option for you and not one that a ton of people use. I've only got 6,000 plate appearances of him within my sample set. Now with Eisenreich, we've got a left-hand bat, and right field's a position we want to drive some offense out of because we've got so much defense elsewhere. So it's good to have a left-handed bat here. He's number 6 in WAR at the position, and he's a slug-heavy bat. So 419, not anywhere near Nelson Cruz from a slugging perspective, but 419 stands out as significantly above average for the position, and he also does so with pretty good glove. So he's 2 percentage points better than the average right fielder at making plays hit his way. So I think he's definitely an option for you if you want to find a left-hand bat who can juice the ball a bit without giving up too much with the glove. And you've got Greg Gross. Tell us why.
So in my model, which again is not fully optimized for bronze, but I would put Greg Gross as the best overall bronze hitter. And I think I've talked with you about this. I've talked with the API about this. And it's not one of those things that super plays out. I think he might be one of those guys that gets unfairly platooned when he needs to be, or doesn't get platooned when he needs to be. I think Greg Gross is fantastic. I think he's severely underrun. He has really good defense. He's got a high BAPIP, and he's got a pretty overall great profile with the really low power, which fuels his BAPIP. There's a lot of people talking about Cedeno in the chat right now. I think Cedeno is a worse version of Greg Gross, personally. Cedeno has worse defense and, in my opinion, a much worse bat. Now, the trade-off is Cedeno's insane base running, and Cedeno does have the better BAPIP. So he might make some more contact, be some more consistent, but I think Gross is going to have a much better on-base percentage and might hit the ball a bit farther with his better gap, and he's going to strike out a ton less. So I like Gross a lot better than Cedeno personally. And I think Gross overall for me is the card I put first in every single bronze build I make as a hitter.
From a meta perspective, our number one plate appearance driver at the position is Roger Cedeno. Number 2, Greg Gross.
That doesn't surprise me at all, really. Cedeno is super popular. I think he's pretty overutilized, but there isn't really that much people with position eligibility in right field. The problem with looking at Cruz and they have a lot of pop. Certainly Cruz has a lot of pop. I didn't realize how much power he had, but the BAPIP is pretty absurdly low. And I think bronze is just one of those formats, at least what the strategy I've been trying to utilize recently is something where you have to just constantly be making contact to try and put runners across.
Yeah, I think the argument against that would just be that the meta pitchers, for the most part, are high-low-high guys. And by that, I mean stuff, movement, control. And so movement is where people are low. And so if you can make the contact with Cruz, you can leverage that low movement rating on that reliever or that starter that's in there and put it over the fence. But this is why bronze is so much fun, because you can have these debates. And depending on who you go up against, there's a different optimal team. Maybe you don't go against someone who's running really low movement pitchers, and Cruz is a terrible option for you. Or maybe you run into a team that's all low movement, and then Cruz is the answer to your prayers. All right, let's go glove lovers here. We've got Kevin Pillar and Joe Orsulak on my side, giving you a righty and a lefty. On your side, well, look at that. It's Greg Gross again. The love affair continues. I'll go over mine first as you get lathered up to talk some more Gross here in a second. But Kevin Pillar, just like his real-life persona, a great defender out in right field. And in addition to that, he's our number one WAR driver at the position. So of all right fielders, he's driving more WAR than anyone else. And he's doing so with a bad OBP. He's at 287, which is well beneath the league average for a right fielder. But he's got pretty decent slug. So he's at 417 on the slug, which is 30 points above league average at the position. So similar to Nelson Cruz, you're making a trade-off here. You're giving up his on base in exchange for him going over the fence or for him going extra bases from time to time. So certainly an interesting option there. Now Orsulak is here. I wouldn't necessarily consider him an overly viable option. He is the number one play percent guy. So of all right fielders, he gets to more than anyone else. But not really viable with the bat here. He's a 259 OBP, 204 with the average. Just not a lot to like there, but he would be the guy if you were targeting the ultimate defensive build. So tell us more about Greg Gross.
Of all the bats I looked at that I liked in right field, I didn't see anybody with a higher defense number than Greg Gross. So I put Greg Gross again on the list because I'm going to keep telling people Greg Gross is really good, and I think him being second on popularity, not okay. Needs to be higher. Needs to be like a good 0.
Campaigning for Greg Gross as we speak. All right, we move on to unique options here, and we've got Gerald Williams on my side to go with Jesus Alou. And then on your side, oh no! we've got Greg Gross again. Kidney's running a wild operation over there. All right, let me sell you on Gerald Williams. So Gerald Williams is not just an option in right field. He's right-handed batter, so you're likely going to short side platoon him. But he also carries stock defense in center field, which you're going to need at some point because Darren Ersad's going to need a day off. If you're not running a platoon in center, you're going to need someone to back up your center fielder. And he's also not too dissimilar to Cruz. He's got that slug-heavy profile, so he can come in, he can put a ball over the fence. And he's also got very good outfield defense. So across the board, he offers a lot. That stock defense being something that stock defense in center that I particularly find valuable because it allows you to not have to stuff another outfielder on your team. But the slugging and the defense also assets to think about as well. Now, Jesus here, he's got the best average at the position. And in this unique run-scoring environment where you've got a lot of people stealing bases, and we've even gone over some guys getting on base, we haven't talked a ton about guys actually getting hits. And Jesus Alou is a guy who can actually get hits. He's a 747 OPS. So he's not just getting some singles here and there. He's getting extra base hits. And he's also leading the position in batting average. So certainly an interesting option. And people are floating Cedeno. Absolutely. Cedeno, I put him on my left field slide. I think I have him on my DH slide. He's absolutely within this conversation here. For variety's sake, I left him off this slide because I had him on my left field slide, but he's absolutely in this conversation. But here are some other options to consider. And kidneys, for the last and final time, the floor is yours to talk about Greg Gross.
Yes, so Greg Gross, good. I'm actually going to talk about your picks a little bit. I think your unique pick should have been your big bat picks. You picked two very big power bats with very good BAPIPs, and they are probably two of the best power hitting right fielders, in my opinion. These would be my two big bats if I wasn't so obsessed and in love with a man named Greg Gross. If you want to try a more power heavy right field option, I think Jesus Alou is fantastic. Even maybe able to play both sides of the plate. He's so good. And Gerald Williams is just a great lefty killer. So I think those two guys are great, but also please play Greg Gross. He's so good. Just play it.
All right, your Greg Gross hour is over, and honestly, it was gross. All right, so let's talk DH. Now, odds are that someone that we've talked about to this point is going to be your DH. Every name on my list here, Jose Martinez, Jesus Alou, Bill Buckner, Harvey Kuenn, I've talked about all of them before. I've dropped stats on you, and you need to build a team. And your team is going to have people in the field that's going to have someone with a designated hitter tag on them. And these are some of the big bats that I'd consider for that role. And now on your side, you've got two new submissions, Don Newcomb and Tommy Helms, to go with Harvey Kuenn. Tell us why.
Don Newcomb. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. So Don Newcomb is not only the most underrated bronze hitter, he is the GOAT. Don Newcomb has a BAPIP ranging in the 120s. If you are not familiar with how absurd that number is, go take a look at my sheet if you use it, and then compare anything and look at how absurd 120 is. Yes, Don Newcomb is the best card in the game, period. No, on a more realistic scale, I think Don Newcomb is something I've been playing around with recently. And he actually hits really, really well because his BAPIP is the highest in the actual entire game. If you're not familiar with BAPIP at this point, hi, I'm the BAPIP salesman. What BAPIP is it's how often the card makes contact with the ball, and then the ball, well, not how often the card makes contact, it's how often the ball in play actually goes for a hit. So when Don Newcomb makes contact with the ball, it's almost always an actual hit. So it leads him to being a super consistent average, a super high average hitter. And so he's not going to hit doubles. He's not going to hit home runs, but he is going to be the best goddamn singles hitter you will ever see. Tommy Helms is basically the right-handed hitter version of Don Newcomb, and then Harvey Kuenn may just have the overall best bat in bronze. I don't think Harvey Kuenn plays V Wright, I know a lot of people play him both sides, and I think that's a mistake. That's kind of why I put him on here, just because I want to talk about him a little bit. But no, seriously, Don Newcomb is somebody just to look at, even just maybe to get a taste of BAPIP and learn why it's so important in the game.
Very good. And so I've got a couple more options here, a couple of unique options. And this is where I put Cedeno and Leopold because I don't consider them big bats. You know, Leopold's OPS is nothing to call home about, but it's that OBP that is. That 355 OBP, someone actually getting on base at a high clip in this run-scoring environment that is very unique and uniquely valuable. And the same can be said for Cedeno. Take a little bit off the OBP, but jack up the BSR and give him the ability to play in either corner as needed. And now you've got Dick Hauser.
Yes, I have Dick Hauser. I put Dick Hauser on here to make Walnut happy, so you can forgive me for saying Harvey apparently Keen's name wrong. There you go. I put Dick Hauser.
I mean, at this point, I think people are just making it up just to make us look stupid.
There's
every
no way
time we say something,
it's got a U in it. You're telling me the U and the other N is silent? What?
Now it's Nemo Leopold, and then it's Jose Martinez.
Is it French? So we just say Nemo the bald?
I took 5 years of French. Don't remember a word. All right, so did you talk about Hauser? I was too distracted by people complaining about another mispronounced name.
No, Hauser was just, I put him on there to make Walnut giggle. That was literally the entire reason.
Okay. Well done. Well done. All right, so that is our run through. And you know, we didn't present to you like this is the bronze team for you to deploy. Now go deploy it, because there isn't a right answer when it comes to bronze. There is a bunch of micro decisions that go together to make a complete bronze team. And that's why I want to encourage all of you to play with it a bit. You know, people like API and Kidneys and I, you know, we're all looking at the same data, and we all come to different conclusions on what the actual correct build is. And, you know, some people are more comfortable with a little weaker glove here. Some people are prioritizing OBP here. Some people want some slug in the lineup over there. Catcher defense, nuanced decisions. Like, bronze is a great meta in that way. It's not like Perfect League where for the most part you need to run 20 of the same guys, and then there's 6 other guys that you can debate, you know, the appropriateness of their position, and maybe you can swap a couple guys around. You know, this truly is a nuanced meta where you can express yourself and really create a personalized build to be what you want. And hopefully this presentation and this conversation has walked you through some of those potential candidates for these roles. And like people have been pointing out in the chat the entire night, there are people that we didn't even have on the slide deck that are absolutely worthy of consideration. Gustine at third base. There's another couple of bodies in the outfield that we didn't mention. So I think that what I came away with as I looked at the present day bronze meta is that it's in a really good spot. There's a lot of choices for people to make, and it's fun. It's fun seeing how they make them. It's fun seeing how those choices evolve. And one of the things that I like to do is look at which teams are being successful. So I'm going to call out a couple teams right now. Maybe some of the people are here. So I run Pythagorean win expectancy on all of the teams that are in my extracted data. So I've got tons of data now. And at this point, the top bronze teams by Pythagorean, and it tops out at 620, are the Ropraz Bulls, the Guilford Indians, Threat Level Midnight, Enigma Polar Grizzlies, Hesperia Blue Jackets, Laurel Canyon Musicians, Daniel Lafferty, Palatine Plutos, and then a name that I will for sure mispronounce, but it looks like Ciudad Trujillo Dragones. So if you were named, kudos to you. You definitely look like you're doing something right in your build. And if your name wasn't named there, then keep tinkering. Keep messing with it. Keep playing with it. It's a ton of fun. But thank you guys for indulging us. This was a super long segment. We planned it for today because we knew we only had 5 cards to go through. So we thought we might have more patience and more appetite for people to get super nerdy here. Let us know in the chat if this is more of what you'd like to see going forward. It's always good to have community feedback on what it is we're providing. If we're going too deep, not deep enough. And yes, we will do pitching. We will do pitching in a future episode. Definitely wasn't enough time to include both hitting and pitching in today.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. It was fun. I know I had some memes with the Greg Gross. I know a lot of people Wally Backmaning me. I actually think Don Newcomb is just better Wally Backman. It's a little controversial, but if you're playing Wally Backman, maybe try out Don Newcomb as your DH. He can't play the field, but I think he's a better hitter. No, it was a lot of fun. I think this is really interesting stuff, and I'd love to do more deep dives. So if you guys liked it, talk to us on Discord and tell us how you feel about it, or tell us if you're grossed out by me quoting Greg Gross so many times in a minute and probably setting some sort of world record. So yeah, no, I had a lot of fun. I'll fix the camera for next week and we'll be good to go. So thanks everyone for stopping by. I had a great time. It's always a pleasure to do this. It's always so surreal having everybody on here listening to us blabber on about baseball. So it's really a fun thing to do, and I love it. So that's all.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of action in the chat that we missed out on while we were doing this too. I see that Chuck, Wait Till Next Year, and Mac all gifted at least 5 subscriptions out to the community. So huge thank you to you guys for the support. Thank you for giving other people the opportunity to support the stream. We definitely really appreciate that. Thanks for the bits that people were throwing in as well. I see Crash SF Giants was in there as the number 1 bit provider today. API, tons of support, great, and really appreciate it. And then our buddy Walnut absolutely included as well. And for anyone who's new today, please do drop us a follow. Please click the bell so that you know when we go live. And if you like what you're seeing and if you want to support what we're doing, please give consideration to dropping a subscription as well, or continuing a subscription that someone else gifted you. That's the very best way to tell us that we're doing a good job, and the very best way to encourage us to keep producing new content and new shows like this. My next show will be Sunday, and it will be on the Out of the Park channel. It'll be our first and maiden voyage on that channel, broadcasting the Perfect League World Series. We'll have to hope and pray that it goes according to plan. Obviously, given that I'm not in the Perfect League, we're having to technically solve that challenge to give me the opportunity to view the highlights, and we're on like step 9 of 10 for that. Just need to make sure it's going to work. So if we do bump into any challenges, don't be too surprised, but I'm sure we'll work through them quickly. But again, thanks for the all the support tonight, and thanks for joining, and we'll see you later. Bye.